My dear students, as we have discussed about the different kind of reference checks, very important component in the reference check is to select a vendor. The purpose of the vendor is to check the references for you. Here are some helpful guidelines when selecting a vendors to conduct background checks, because it is not an easy job to select a vendor, and there are some very important things must need to be considered before selecting a vendor. What are those things? Let's discuss. First of all, be patient. Most credible vendors will require as many as 5 days to conduct a thorough background checks. So 5 days must need to be given to the vendors so they can do the thorough reference checks for you. Although some can be accomplished effectively in as few as 3 days. So if you would rush, it would be a problematic for you, for your company, and for the vendor as well. So never rush and give them an appropriate time to check the references. Rushing through the process could result in overlooking important information. Obviously, if you would give them less time than required, they would rush to collect information, and that information can be faulty. So it will lead to the poor reference checks. So always give them an appropriate time so they can go through the whole process in an effective manner. Hence, if a third-party agency tells you that it requires a week to do a thorough job, be patient and think about how you will feel knowing you didn't cut any corners. So if someone is asking for more time because of some personal history and some other background information, always allow them to spend more time to go through the reference checks. You get what you pay for. Obviously, conducting background checks can be a very costly activity. Sometimes most of the companies are not interested to go through reference checks by the third party. So they avoid to have a reference checks through costly companies. So the average cost for the basic search is under $100. So you can transfer that $100 into rupees in the context of Pakistani organization. But it is not much common to do the reference checks through the third parties in Pakistan. However, a background checks on an executive can be more than double that amount. So it depends on the position. If you are going for a professional position, obviously they would charge more money. If you would go for a top management position, the money would be more than double or more than triple. So you need to think that what kind of position it is, what kind of reference checks you are asking for. So the amount of the reference checks depend on the position, the status of the person who is getting the job in the company. If an applicant has moved around from one company or company location to another, the price is going to be higher. Obviously, if an applicant is moving within the province, obviously such kind of amount would be more higher because of its relocation from one position to another position. If the vendors offers to conduct a search for considerably less money, be cautious. There are some vendors which are using the shortcuts to check the references, and they can do such kind of job in a very less amount. So if some of the vendor is asking for the less amount, it doesn't mean that the person is very good and very kind to you. It means you need to be cautious, and it means that the person is not going to the reference checks in an effective manner. So be cautious if someone is asking for a very less amount for reference checks. Be vigilant how the vendor acquires his criminal history information. This is very important. There are three main methods that vendors use to acquire this data. There are using in-house researchers. They can use using in-house researchers. They can contract local court retrieval service companies to go to the courts for them and doing database searches for the reference checks. So these three methods can be used, and the best vendors are those. Most credible firms rely on a combination of the three methods, because if you would use all of the three methods for the reference checks, obviously the authenticity of the reference checks would be more. The credibility of the reference check would be more. So most credible companies use to go through all three methods to check the references. If you are considering a vendor that relies on a third-party databases to conduct criminal history record checks, ask if the court sanctions the database and how often the material is updated. So from where they are getting the data, that material must need to be updated. If the material is updated, obviously it enhances the credibility and the validity of the data retrieved from such kind of a databases. So always ask such kind of critical questions when you are going to select a vendor for the reference checks of any positions in your company.